Wow. Hi.
Hi.
I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Hello Freedom.
Thank you. Great to be here with you.
Super, super exciting. So, for those of you who can't see us, because we're videoing and we're audioing for Hello Freedom, my guest today is Jasyn Gaddis, and he is a relationship student and teacher, which I really do appreciate. And how I know him is that he is the host of a really, really great podcast called Smart Couple Podcast. And he's also the founder of the Relationship School. So, what I loved about your bio and about your whole vibe on relationships is that you're basically a forever student, as I am,
Yeah.
and as all of us are, but with real intention to be. So, can I just start by asking you what inspired you to become a forever student of relationships and to be motivated enough to create a very popular podcast?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just great to see you and really good to be here. My failures, Terry, got me motivated enough to be like, okay, I'm the problem. Let's do something about it. So I finally submitted after years of pushing women away and said, okay, maybe I'm the problem and I got something to learn here. So since that day, I'm like student mode.
Love it. What are you finding though? What I find fascinating about your podcast, you have such great interviewees and you're a great interviewer, but you really talk about the stuff that people want to know about. So I'm curious about the feedback that you get because here's the thing, it's not surprising that I'm a relationship expert to most people because there's
Yeah.
lots and lots of women psychotherapists, connectedness. This is all, like wheelhouse of women in the past. It has been. Obviously,
Mhm.
that's been changing. But who is your audience?
I'd say it's people ages 30 to 50-ish. Certainly there's some younger and older. And it's mostly women. Maybe 80%, 75% women, 25% men, let's say.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
And they're into
Go ahead.
growing and developing themselves.
I hope though that that's changing. I hope that this whole tipping point, and I wanted to talk to you about this too, where we are with the whole sexual harassment, everyone in the world being accused and toppled, and all of
Yeah.
that. I hope that this tipping point will change your numbers to be a little bit more 50-50.
That'd be amazing, right? I mean, the more men that we can get to go inside and connect to their heart and learn how to do what I think is actually intuitive below all your defenses is connection. I think we're wired for connection. So I think it is in men as well. They know how to connect. They're just, buried behind their conditioning.
Indeed. The some of the titles of the podcast as I was going through prepping for today. So, vetting a future partner, amazing. The trap of becoming your partner's therapist with Danielle Laporte, which is that how we met? Was through Danielle?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing. Wow.
Uh-huh.
Can you imagine that I fell into that trap 47 times before my husband? Right. The
That was a
no
great.
sex. What do I do? Therapy versus coaching. Just so many good titles. So, let's dive into if you don't mind.
Sure.
The no sex, what do I do with married couples? What did you come up with in that episode?
Yeah. Let me refresh my memory here. I think I was saying the number one reason people stop having sex in their marriage isn't what they think it is. Like a lot of people are like, oh, we fell out of love. Like I'm not attracted to him or her anymore. Um, on and on. Like a lot of people make up a lot of reasons. In my experience, and I'd be curious to get your take, is fear. We have stressful lives. We're busy, blah, blah, blah. We have kids, let's say, and we just start to drift a little bit. And then anytime we start to drift, to try to bridge that gap gets harder the longer you go and the more scared you become. And by scared, I don't necessarily also mean like cognitively scared. It's like our nervous system stops feeling safe emotionally and physically with the other body, the other person, because of years of resentments or avoiding or whatever's going on in our lives, stress in our life, work. And our nervous system now perceives my partner as stressful and threatening. So I'm
So
not going to open my body up to you.
no, it doesn't feel safe. So what do you think are ways that people can get back to each other sexually? And I'll give you my 2 cents on that too. But
Yeah, please. Well, again, the big thing is to be aware of, okay, it's been a while, and am I really okay with that? And if I'm really okay with that, then at least whether I'm okay with it or not, I would be having a conversation with my partner and saying, look, it's been a year since we've had sex or made love, and I know we're kind of going through a lot, and I'm strangely okay with it. And I kind of prefer this way of being. It feels too uncomfortable to go there, and I'd rather not. That's one way that would be perfectly okay.
Mm-hmm.
Another way would be to lean in a little more and say, I'm scared to, do this, but I want to be intimate with you, but I'm kind of scared, and I've been resorting to porn or, distracting at work with this woman or, leaking energy or whatever. And it's
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to get in there with you because you're my spouse. Can we do this?
Mm-hmm.
So just having these kind of open, honest dialogues, right?
Yes.
What do you think?
I think that those are both great. And I think that, listen, talking, communicating, connecting, our problems do not magically go away, no matter how skillfully we avoid them. The truth
Yeah.
is the chickens always come home to roost at some point. I always say to couples, when I used to work with couples, and if I'm working with a client who's in this situation, that you have to find your way back on your own. And it doesn't have to be, if you haven't had sex in a year or haven't made love in a year, it doesn't have to be sex. But it's all about intimacy. And it's like, start by just giving each other massages or saying, hey, let's do that. Remember
Mm-hmm.
we used to do that and it felt good and was fun. And I know we haven't been making time lately, but what do you think about that? It's
Yeah.
a very non-threatening way of bringing the physicality back into the relationship. But I say to young couples, when you're starting out in a relationship and when you're so driven erotically and sexually towards someone, especially in the beginning, it just happens so naturally because this is before life happens and children. I know
Mm-hmm.
you have 2 kids, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So this is before
Yeah.
kids happen and they become this massive top priority and take so much energy. And there's so much responsibility when you're raising children that everything in the work that I do with the Real Love Revolution and the Boundary Bootcamp, I'm all about proactive boundary success plans, I call them.
Yeah. I love it.
So the same thing with, addiction, and in the rooms, people will say, it isn't about, somebody goes out and they say, I did not plan to drink at that party. I didn't plan to relapse. And then, of course, what does the wisdom in the room say? You have to plan to not relapse.
Mm-hmm.
You actually need a plan, people, places, and things type of a plan that if you are there, if you're starting to feel something, you have numbers in your phone, you get out of the situation, whatever it is. Because if not, if we just let the way we feel on this day, this one day, that next day, sort of dictate what we do in life,
Yeah.
we won't be able to, it's really hard to sustain a relationship without planning, without some kind of, you need a plan, an effort
Totally.
to put it in, and to also
Yes.
talk about it. Because the bottom line is, when I say the chickens come home to roost, what you said in your example, like, oh, I'm being distracted by other people,
Yeah.
or I'm fantasizing about an ex, or I got in touch with my high school boyfriend on Facebook, or whatever, that's what ends up happening. And there's
Mm-hmm.
all of this miscommunication, like what you were saying. It isn't, I'm not attracted to this person anymore. Those aren't the reasons. It's that we have to create the right container to
Mm-hmm.
stay attracted. Because the attraction that you have in the beginning, this is right what draws you into the relationship. That's what gets you together, but that doesn't keep you together,
Yeah.
you know?
I'm with you. Yeah. Totally. There are a couple things you said there that I like. One was the plan, like proactively, in other words, plan for, there's going to be fighting, maybe there's going to be some distance. So plan on what's our plan? How do we stay connected through hard times? And then the other thing was, what I heard was kind of a baby step, right? Be gentle. It doesn't have to go to intercourse, for example, after a year of no sex. It can be all these little kind things that have the other person's body and nervous system feel safe. So just a
Yes.
touch on the foot, or a light massage, or honey, can I just give you a back rub? Or can I just sit next to you? Or can we sleep together in the same bed? It's been a year since we haven't.
Mm-hmm.
Can we snuggle? That kind of thing is exactly, we need to, it's like foreplay, right? It's like just these gentle steps that tell me that you're actually interested in me and that we can gently go towards lovemaking.
Yes. And what are other things that are foreplay besides
Oh,
foreplay?
yeah. I mean, it's funny as being a guy. I've had to learn this one the hard way, because in moments, sometimes I'm like, I'm ready. Let's go. Sex, you know?
Yay.
And my wife's like, oh, dude, hold on. Whoa, hold on a second. I haven't felt connected to you. You haven't even acknowledged me today, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, what I've learned and what I teach men is like, it's days of looking in her eyes and taking an interest in her and behaving in a way that has her feel like a priority,
Right.
right? Just caring and noticing her, appreciating her throughout the week. Because I know the weekend's coming up and we have a date night. So it's a plan. But she coached me to that. It's like, look, I need to feel like you care about me for many days, and I need to feel that level of safety because then my body wants to be around your body. And so these are the kind of things. So it's actually, a lot of people think foreplay is like, okay, dim the lights and you get the music right. And it's like, no. For me, it starts days prior.
Well, that's great insight, and I'm so psyched that someone is teaching men that, because I find that most men, the men that I know, are really good guys, and they really do want to make their partner happy. They want to be their partner's hero or their best friend, whatever it is. But we're wired so differently. And the whole book, Men are from Mars, Women are from Venus. There was something that was so incredibly accurate. I mean, that book, I don't know, 25 years ago, 20 years ago, something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you think about the differences in the genders, about the way that we feel valued, feel important, and like you said, feel safe. And I know because my practice is predominantly women, that there's so much about feeling seen, as your wife was saying to you, but also help. There is nothing that will make a woman want to have sex with you more than you helping her without her asking.
Yeah.
Or without her feeling like she's got to cajole you sort of into it. The things that she just wants you to do, please take out the garbage or whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be such traditional roles, but there's a reality that for women are very, very connected emotionally. And I feel like you're teaching men to be, and men can be,
Yeah.
but no one has ever taught them to be. So tell me a little bit about what you teach in your school. So tell us the
Yeah.
full name and what the deal is.
Yeah. So I teach a class called The Deep Psychology of Intimate Relationships. It's the class that you and I would have loved to have probably taken in freshman year of college or senior year in high school to kind of prep us for the real world of love relationships. And it's basically a big course on how relationships work, the psychology of people, human behavior, and then how to do them well. And so how to listen well, how to advocate for your needs, which needs are non-negotiable needs, which are independent versus dependent needs, how to set a boundary. I know you're big on this, and how do we take good care of ourselves and get the connection we want without betraying who we are to get the connection, the childhood strategy. So, and then we do a lot of practice because practice is what gets results. So the students right now are halfway through the semester, halfway through the course, first semester's ending, and they've got to kind of demonstrate that they know how to listen until the other person feels understood. And they've had to practice. And it's hard to actually listen until someone feels understood. Because that's the true measure, is when I say, I feel understood, you got me. You got it. You're listening to me really well.
Right.
So there's a lot to it, but that's some of what we go.
And
go
is it men and women in the group?
Yeah, it's actually, that's what's cool. It's probably almost half and half. It's almost that 50-50 number.
Right on. I
Yeah.
love it. All right, so let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit more about listening
Okay.
and gender differences and tips and ideas of how to be what I call an athletic listener.
Nice. Yeah.
Right?
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. So my wife, again, taught me that I thought I was a good listener, and I trained as a psychotherapist, so I thought I was a listening badass, right? And then I'd come home, and in the heat of the moment or whatever, turns out I wasn't a great listener. I would defend. I'd do the classic guy things: defend, fix, give advice. So I have one thing that I tell all my students, and that's don't frack on your partner. and it's an acronym. So it's like we say no fracking, right? And most of us don't like fracking in the world, so we're just kind of playing with that metaphor of no fracking here in the relationship, and each stands for a name, and I'll quickly go through it. F is no fixing, R is no rescuing, A is no advice giving, C is no complaining, and K is no killing their experience, which basically means, no, that's not what happened. And that's killing someone's experience. So we play with this like, hey, I don't want to frack and there's contexts where fracking is fine. Like, I want advice sometimes. Give me some fucking advice, Terri.
Sure, exactly.
Right?
Happy to do it.
But that's our context, right? But if you got your feelings hurt, and I'm fracking on you, you're probably just going to keep getting contracted and not really let down,
right?
And not feel understood or seen. So no fracking is the big thing to start with.
That's so major. And honestly, Jason, if that was the only thing you taught any one person who came through your school, the world would change.
Yeah.
Because I find that with all of those are great things to not do, like you said, depending on the context.
Yeah.
But the biggest conflict that I see with couples is that women want to be heard.
Yeah.
They don't want to be fixed.
That's
and
right.
It's on but both parties have to be clear about their own communication. What are we doing right now? And I've certainly trained my husband, and he'll straight up ask. The easiest question I always tell, it's men and women, because women are fixers too. And women are, the immediate advice givers that nobody's asking for as well, thinking they're helping, thinking it's being loving. And yet really, when people give me advice, when I'm not asking for advice, I get so pissed. And I'm like, oh, hey, what's not helpful? That is not helpful. I don't need you. And the motivation behind doing it is all about stopping our own anxiety around that person's problem. I'm doing quotation marks for those of you who are listening to this, where, hey, it's their problem to fix. And like you said, if someone comes, my husband will say, are we brainstorming? But the one thing that you can ask, and he always asks, is how can I best support you right now?
Mm-hmm.
Like super straight. It's a straight question. And sometimes I say, can you make us a cup of tea and we can talk about it, or let's fool around, or I don't know. There's many different things that he can best support me right now, depending on what the problem is. But the main thing is understanding that we barely have the answers for ourselves, right? This is the lifelong quest of becoming illuminated about who we actually are. Yeah. So feeling like we know and I want to go back to the killing someone's experience thing. I did this list a bunch of years ago. I don't know, it was on my 14th wedding anniversary, and I think we're coming up on our 20th soon. And one of them, and I just did it off the top of my head. This is when I started really getting into love stuff, because it was always what I was most interested in. But I had become well known for fear. So, that's what I was being hired to talk about and whatever. But I did a TED Talk on it, but I was, what am I really lit up about? It was always love. And so one of the things is, don't interrupt them telling the story, in parentheses, even if they are telling it all wrong.
Yeah.
Because and that is so hard to do. Trust me. That is so hard to do when someone is telling the story all wrong. But you're like, hey, this is their experience. Maybe that is how it happened for them. And even if the facts are wrong, like, don't get in there, because it really is very diminishing.
Yeah.
To have
it's not a courtroom, right?
Yeah. Are we under oath?
And when we're in the back part of our brain and we're in a fight, neither of us have the facts correct. It's just not, I'm not that accurate. If I'm heated, I'm not going to remember it precisely what went down. So it's, to me, futile to try to even explain that. No, I know exactly. That's not what happened. This is what happened. It's better to say, my experience was this. What was your experience?
Exactly.
So simple, right? But
they'll be so different, though, is the reality.
They're different, and that's okay.
Right. But they don't have to be one is right and one is wrong.
Correct.
So what do you think about that in relationships, and what have you seen about people's need to be right? How does that impact relationships?
Yeah, it's terrible. It's like kills a relationship. It's the fast track to doom.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if anyone wants to play that way, be my guest, and it doesn't go well for people I mean, it's another form of blame. This is how it is. And often when I'm in that position, I feel like I'm wanting to control the situation because, as you said, I'm uncomfortable. I'm upset and I'm trying to regulate my own sort of emotions here. So fixating on being right is like almost a perceived way I'm going to try to get control and feel okay again. Because maybe as a kid, I grew up with a stern father who always accused me of X, Y, and Z. And I learned like I got to prove myself. I got to be in control of the right and wrong here. And then my church told me that. And that just doesn't go well in partnerships. So it's the smart couple that can evolve out of that and move into a more dynamic place, a more agile place where, I want to understand what it's like to be you, and I want you to understand what it's like to be me, given what went down. And can we just hear each other out respectfully? And then from there, if I truly understand you, I might, and I'm really listening, and I'm not waiting for my turn, but I'm actually listening to you. It might change how I completely see what went down. If I can really be present, I can let go of my whole thing and be like, and then I can validate you. Oh, it makes sense that that's how you saw it, or that's how you heard it, and then it makes sense you got upset. Okay, now it's making sense to me.
Right. I think there's a really good something I learned from Deepak, and I feel like we might have talked about this when I was on your show, about looking at a conflict from the point of view of a New York Times reporter.
Mm,
And the moment when I find myself like digging in my heels about something that I'm really needing to be really right about, and it's not just in a romantic relationship. I use this little strategy in any situation where I find myself. I can feel when I'm being super constricted about something, and I'm
yeah.
like, okay, you're a therapist. You know something else is going on here. If you could look at both points of view, so I would look at what I'm saying, what I think happened, and what the other person is saying and
Hmm.
thinks happened. It's like suddenly there's this space to
Yeah.
see both sides and say, maybe it isn't only this way. And so understanding ourselves of why do we get defensive? There's this thing that I do in the boundary boot camp called the defensiveness cure, like just one of the parts of one of the modules,
Yeah.
because it is such a damaging, I mean, what is it? It's a psychological defense mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Defending the ego that is so fragile and scared to be wrong.
Yeah. Protecting insecurity. Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
what it does in the process is, you become someone people don't want to talk to.
That's right. Yeah. I just had that happen yesterday. Someone was giving them feedback and they just defended themselves, and I just lost interest. I was like, it's not going anywhere.
Jason, what? It just got really boring. It was boring. I totally get it. It's so true. You're like, oh, I've been down this road. I had this
Yeah.
very revealing experience about defensiveness in my early 20s that was very, it's life altering. Of course, at the time I was like mortified, but I learned. And I was an assistant at a agency, and I remember my boss saying whatever he was saying, that I should have done something differently. And I was like, well, Scott, I did it that way because of blah, 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 like giving my reasons. He was like, Terry, I don't care. I was like, what? He was like, your defensiveness is really unprofessional. Now I'm dying already. Like I'm just dying. I'm about to burst out into tears. I was
Right.
22 years old. But he was
Yeah.
like, listen, you're my assistant. I don't. I'm sure you have plenty of good reasons for doing whatever you did the way you did it. I don't care. What I care about is you listening to me and making the changes I'm asking you to make.
Hmm.
And I was like, okay, copy that. Bye. Went to the bathroom, cried.
Copy that. Boom.
I think I got it. But what did
Yeah.
I learn from that experience? That nobody likes someone who's defensive. And it really is I read this somewhere. Defensiveness. Oh, I think it was Dr. Harriet Lerner. Do you know her work?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
she's had such an impact on my life and my work.
Mm.
And I'm obsessed with her. I
Oh,
think I'm a
cool.
cyber stalker. It's crazy.
Yeah, I got to have her on the podcast.
Oh
Yes.
my God, me too. I've been trying, trust me. I've been like
Uh,
stalking her. So those of you who, if you don't know her, she wrote a series of books called The Dance of Deception, The Dance of Intimacy, The Dance of Anger. She's been a leader in this field for decades. She's just so wonderful. She's so,
Mhm.
so smart. All of the work that I do and that I talk about relationships being a dance, really all of that information for me originated in the work, what I learned from her.
Mm.
And she says that defensiveness is the arch enemy of listening.
Yeah. Nice.
You're like,
Right.
wow. I mean, just mind blown,
Boom.
mind blown. Exactly.
Yeah.
So awesome. So, all right. So I have another question I want to ask you. Hold on, I'm going down
Yeah.
here. Because, with the work that I do, I'm really interested in a male perspective. And I've had a lot of men on YouTube and on my podcast asking me, people writing in saying, why don't you do stuff for men? Why don't you actually have courses for men? Because all of my courses right now are exclusively for women. So
Hmm.
I'm really interested in being a part of that solution. We're hitting this tipping point. So I'm going to ask you about your own, just a couple of questions about your, what I call real love revolutionary journey, right? So
Yeah.
your love journey to your current situation. You're very transparent in all the work that you do about where you are in your life and your relationship. So tell me a little bit about how you met your wife and how you knew she was the one and that.
Okay, cool. Well, there's definitely a long hero's journey story there, but the short of it is, and it's a really beautiful story because I remember I'm coming from a background where women are threatening in some way, so I got to keep them at arm's length. And as I dove into therapy and I really started working on myself and I started getting that I was the issue and I had a lot of stuff with mom, I started attracting a different caliber of woman, and she came along. And I remember telling my close friend that introduced us in the hallway in grad school. We were both studying psychology. She was 2 years ahead of me. And our mutual friend, she was like, "So what'd you think? Like, what's up?" And I was like, "Well, she's like a woman, and I'm used to dating girls."
Mm.
And I was intimidated, honestly, because I hadn't met someone like more in themselves. My pattern was to date younger women and kind of be the hero. It was sort of my thing. So to meet an equal was like, it didn't click really. So
Mm.
at first, I honestly, I wasn't that attracted or drawn to her because I was like intimidated. And she asked me out like a year later, and we went out, and I think she would say I was pretty cool in that moment. But basically, a lot of my defenses started coming up, and we started dating a few months later, and I got really scared really fast, and all my intimacy shit came up, and to the point where when she first told me she loved me, I could barely look at her because I was so scared,
Mm.
honestly. And so I had a fucking lot to work through, Terry. I mean, it was a big journey. And then we had a couple of big breakups where I was convinced she wasn't the one. And there was someone else that was, quote, better for me down the road. And the first breakup was pretty hard. We got back together like 6 months later. And then we had another breakup where I was basically had a fantasy going about another woman that I wanted and needed to pursue. And we broke up in like November around Thanksgiving. And then I went on a month-long meditation retreat to
Wow.
sit 9 hours a day. And I broke up with her right before I left. It was like, hey, see you later. And then I could go hide in this meditation retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And she wrote me a letter, like, I think a week into it, basically like a fuck you letter. Here's all the ways you're a total douchebag and all the things you did wrong. And initially I was defensive as hell, as we were just talking about. And then eventually, though, Terry, every week sitting with myself 9 hours a day, I started like going, week 2, it was like, she's on to me a little bit. Week 3, I was like, yeah, she's right there, maybe not there. And by week 4, I was like, she's got me. Like, she's totally right on the money here. She nailed me.
Mm.
And that had me just totally see her differently. Like, God, she sees me. She sees my patterns. She totally gets me. She cuts right through all the shit. And then it was like she had left the door cracked open, and long story short, and I asked her to marry me like a month later. And like 5 months later, we were married. And then we
Wow.
started having kids. So once I put 2 feet in, Terry, it was like game over. I've never been that committed to something in my life. It was like, I am in. And before that, I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out waffle guy, which had us, that's the whole thing we were fighting about for 3 years was the security. She didn't feel safe because I wouldn't fully land with her. I wouldn't fully commit. So no matter what we were fighting about, it was about that.
Right. The horse comes down to like the core. What is it actually about?
Yeah.
Wow. And how long have you been married?
So 10 years now.
Right.
We have 2 kids, 6 and 8. So about almost 7 and 9.
Wow. Because that having kids right away also complicates things. Like you've got to be fully in.
Yeah.
And how do you co-parent? How did you find co-parenting?
We're really solid. Like we both of us, by the way, just to back up a teeny bit, we were both anti-marriage and anti-kids. we just, for whatever reason, we had each of our own like kind of bias and disappointment in what we saw in life. So it's not like we wanted to get married, but then as push came to shove, after that second breakup, there were some things that happened for her and some things that happened for me that, we both got more clear that this is actually, we want to do marriage. And then for me, it happened faster than her. I was an instantaneous, like, kids, game on now. And she was like, whoa, dude, slow the fuck down here. And yet she went and looked at that and had to work on it, and she got on board. And then we started having kids, and we parented really well. I mean, at that point, we'd been through so much that I knew, and now that I was 2 feet in, I was like, what can I do for you? Pregnant woman, now then breastfeeding like our kid. I'm like, I'm here. What can I do to help you relax into this whole experience? And so that was good. And we did 50-50 parenting. I was a stay-at-home dad for probably 4 years. So her and I shared the parenting. We just tag in, tag out, because we were both therapists and could work for ourselves. So we had a great schedule. It was really nice.
Wow, that's such a luxury. It's such amazing. Two of my grown sons are doing that exact thing right now. And one has 3 kids and one has 2 kids. And it is challenging and beautiful all at the same time. But the nourishment that you're pouring into those little humans by being able to do that is just so delicious and amazing. All right, I have one more question, and then I'm going to let you go. What advice would your now self give your 20-year-old self? Just one piece of advice, if you could do it.
Your something about personal responsibility, like your fulfillment in a relationship is on your shoulders. It's not about the other person. It's you. If you want a great relationship or you want to feel known and seen by someone, you're going to have to work with your own defenses and barriers to love.
Right on. That is a perfect place to end. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. It was so awesome. We must do it again. Please tell listeners and watchers of the YouTube vid where they can find you and when is your next school thing starting. So start with where they can find you.
Yeah, cool. Relationshipschool.net is the best place to find us and find me. And the podcast is the Smart Couple Podcast. And our next round of relationship school is enrolling now. I don't know when this goes live, but it's enrolling all through December. Mm-hmm. We start in January. And I'm doing a free web series right now. And people can check that out at relationshipschool.net/new year, because we're going to start the new year with some fucking tools and the right mindset.
Right on. Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's do this again. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, it's so great hanging out with you. It's so fun to jam. Thanks.
No problem.